Once people dreamed of owning that fabulous new invention called a TV. Then they dreamed of having a set that could actually show pictures in color. Now there's a dream for today's generation.
Introducing Flat TV from Philips.
Oh, the magic's gone. The minute the lights go out, you fall asleep.
It's time to change your bulb to Philips.
Hello. I guess you know I find you extremely attractive.
Hey, thank you very much.
It's time to change your light bulb. Philips longer life square bulbs last 33% longer than ordinary round bulbs.
If you're a 90s kid, then you must have been well acquainted with one of the largest electronic brands and subsequently seen these ads before. And in case not, then you've at least heard the name Philips. Or you've probably seen this branding on some light bulbs, razors, and electric toothbrushes. And if you're into a website that shows the global ranking of electronic companies, you'll have to scroll down, down, and down. See, here is a name, Philips. But did you know this 34th ranked company was formed before the electronic giants like Sony and Panasonic? This company was the pioneer of making light bulbs in the 1900s. They've made almost everything, from TVs, radios, to all kinds of domestic appliances. And if you ever heard a song from a cassette tape in your childhood, then you should thank this company for inventing it. Well, in the late 1990s, you could have rarely found a home without a Philips's bulb, TV, or any device. They were on the rage in the electronics world, way ahead of all today's leading brands. Over the past 15 years, they've suffered a massive revenue decline, from over $30 billion to below $20 billion. Their stock, once soaring during the pandemic, has since crashed nearly 80%. This steep fall has dropped them to 34th place in the global electronics rankings. Today, Philips mainly sticks to making razors and electric toothbrushes, which are just a small part of their business. So what happened to this European electronic tech giant? What hit Philips so hard to bring them down here? Let's get the answers. In 1891, in the Netherlands, Gerard Philips, a young engineer with a passion for electrical technology, faced a big challenge. Despite coming from a respected family, he only had his engineering degree and lacked the money and business know-how to start his company. So, he turned to his father, Frederick Philips, a wealthy tobacco merchant and banker, to help him get the business off the ground. Seeing his son's enthusiasm and vision, Frederick agreed to finance the new venture. On May 15th, 1891, Philips & Company was officially founded. The pair set up shop in a small, empty factory in Eindhoven and began producing incandescent lamps and other electrical products. Philips took off with two key ingredients: Gerard's technical expertise and his father's financial support. However, the production kicked off in 1892, and things weren't as smooth as they had hoped. By 1893, the fledgling company was struggling. Gerard had overestimated the market, so the production rate was lower than the market demand. At the same time, they were facing tough competition from German companies. The situation became so dire that the Philips family thought of selling the business. But when the only offer they received was too low, they decided to risk it all and keep going. When the duo looked out for where they are lacking, they found that they need some rudimentary business skills to turn things around. So, Frederick brought his younger son into the business. His name was Anton. In 1895, he was 16 years younger than Gerard but picked up some business know-how while working at a brokerage firm in London. Anton's joining just turned the table around for Philips. His business ideas helped the company find new customers and get through the financial rough patch. So, it started to grow steadily. As the 20th century began, Philips stayed on the cutting edge of electrical innovations by assembling a team of skilled experts. When carbon filament lamps became obsolete in 1907, Philips was quick to adopt more efficient tungsten wire lamps and improve filament production methods. They became leaders in developing new incandescent lamps. By 1912, Philips & Company had evolved into NV Philips Gloeilampenfabrieken and began trading shares on the Amsterdam Stock Exchange. In the early 1900s, Philips didn't just stick to making lamps. By the 1920s, they were producing vacuum tubes, which were essential for radios. Then, in 1927, they began making radios, and their Philips radio broadcasts, like the Happy Station show. It became incredibly popular worldwide. Then World War II began, and it was another challenging time for the company. On May 9, 1940, the Philips directors decided to flee to the United States because there was a high threat of a German invasion. They took substantial company funds from the US from there. They operated as the North American Philips Company, so the business kept running throughout the war. Meanwhile, Fritz Philips, Anton's son, stayed behind in the Netherlands. He played a heroic role by saving 382 Jews, convincing the Nazis that these individuals were crucial to the company's operations. His brave efforts earned him the honor of Righteous Among the Nations by Yad Vashem in 1995. After the war, Philips wasted no time in getting back on his feet. They moved their headquarters back to the Netherlands and tapped into secret research facilities that had been hidden from the Germans during the conflict. In 1949, Philips began selling television sets, and in 1950, they formed Philips Records. After their success with radios, Philips made a major move in the 1960s by creating the compact cassette. This invention was a huge hit, perfectly complementing their radio business. Every time someone used their cassette technology, Philips earned money, and it played a big role in shaping the modern music industry. However, things became more challenging for Philips later on. They developed the CD, but hesitated to release it quickly because they didn't want to harm their cassette business. Meanwhile, Sony seized the opportunity and took the lead with the CD format, forcing Philips to share the technology. Although the CD was still a success, Philips didn't have as much influence over the DVD and Blu-ray formats. Sony dominated these areas, even though Philips had many ideas for them. In the early 2000s, Philips went through significant changes. In 2006, they separated their semiconductor division to create NXP Semiconductors. This move helped shape the semiconductor industry, leading to major companies like ASML and Taiwan's TSMC. Philips also bought Lifeline Systems and Respironics to boost their healthcare business. However, they faced difficulties with their TV manufacturing and eventually sold that part of their business to TPV Technology. In January 2011, Philips acquired Preethi to expand their reach. It was a prominent Indian kitchen appliances company. However, 2011 was a challenging year as the company faced an 85% drop in net profit in Q3. To address financial difficulties, Philips announced a significant job cut of 4,500 positions as part of a $1.1 billion cost-cutting plan. In January 2013, Philips sold its audio and video operations to Japan's Funai Electric for around $163 million. However, the purchase agreement was later terminated by Philips in October due to a breach of contract. Same year, they collaborated with Paradox Engineering on a pilot project for network-connected street lighting management solutions, endorsed by the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. That same year, Philips dropped electronics from their name, rebranding as Royal Philips MV. They introduced their new brand line, Innovation and You, reflecting their commitment to understanding and meeting customer needs. In April 2013, they teamed up with Paradox Engineering to work on a smart street lighting project, which was backed by the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. Despite all these developments and changes, Philips missed several key opportunities, which led to the company's decline. Well, Philips constantly fell behind for two big reasons. They were too slow to keep up with the pace, and they made poor bets on new technologies. For example, Philips Video 2000 was designed to compete with VHS but didn't succeed. Their CDI, an interactive CD format they invested $1 billion in, also took a tumble. Additionally, Philips had trouble keeping up with new technologies like iPods, smartphones, music streaming, and Bluetooth headphones. As a result, they struggled to stay relevant with these evolving trends. The electronic giant's third big area was its consumer electronics. Basically, it came from their success in audio-visual products. They followed their Japanese competitors' lead by expanding their product range instead of focusing on one area. However, this expansion didn't go well for Philips. In some categories, like shavers with their unique circular rotating blades, they could create strong and profitable products. But in most cases, Philips was just one of many brands fighting for a piece of the market. Philips' struggles weren't due to a lack of effort. They took big risks, made significant investments, and pushed for innovation, but often their efforts were in the wrong direction. For example, they developed their own computer line, but the machines weren't compatible with industry-standard software, so sales were poor. They also heavily invested in web TVs. They thought that people would surf the internet and check emails from their TVs using a simplified interface. But this idea also flopped. Even their innovative cell phone lineup didn't catch on with consumers. It even included a quasi-touchscreen smartphone prototype with early 2G. These were costly mistakes. All those drawbacks show that while Philips liked tackling tough technical problems, they lost touch with what consumers actually wanted. Meanwhile, fierce competition, especially from Asia, drove down the profit margins on electronics products to almost nothing. Philips made a lot of innovative products, but by the late 80s, none of them were making significant money. Out of the $137 billion they made from electronics during this period, they only kept $3.7 billion. This would be pitifully low, even for contract manufacturers like Foxconn, let alone for industry giants like Sony and Samsung, who typically have margins around 10 to 20%. After taking multiple painful hits, Philips decided to backslide from electronics and risky innovations. This was the start of their retreat from the electronics business. In 2001, they shut down their famous research lab. By 2012, they had sold their TV and monitor business to TP Vision, a company based in Hong Kong. Just a year later, they sold their audio-visual business to the Japanese company Funai. Finally, in 2021, Philips sold off its last major electronics business unit, the Domestic Appliances division, which made items like vacuum cleaners and coffee machines. With this, Philips officially exited the electronics industry. While this is disappointing, the story of Philips's fourth major business unit, Semiconductors, is even more striking. The public might not remember Philips as a semiconductor company today, but they were a massive pioneer in this field. They started back in 1953, mainly developing components for their own electronic devices, and grew to become the second largest semiconductor company in the world. However, they faced similar issues with semiconductors as they did with electronics. In the 80s and 90s, Philips invested heavily in SORAM memory, but it ended up being a major failure, costing them $1 billion. They also faced issues with poor management during a turbulent market. Because of these difficulties, Philips sold their semiconductor business in 2006, which then became NXP, an independent company. NXP shifted its focus to designing and manufacturing specialized chips for cars and industrial applications. Without Philips's poor decision-making holding them back, NXP flourished. Today, NXP is worth about 4 times as much as Philips and is much more profitable. What's even more surprising is that Philips essentially jump-started two of the world's most important semiconductor companies today, TSMC and ASML. ASML, the only company in the world capable of making the most important machines for chip production, is now worth $266 billion, about 15 times as much as Philips, and is Europe's most valuable technology company. Philips, along with another firm called ASM, started ASML in 1984. Their focus on lithography, the process of using light to transfer chip designs onto silicon wafers, put them in a strong position. However, as development took longer than expected and the market was rough, both founding companies decided to largely exit the venture, selling it off to become an independent entity after just 4 years of operations. This was part of the fifth major restructuring Philips went through in those 2 decades. As for TSMC, the Taiwanese giant is now the world's second most valuable chip company and dominates the manufacturing side of the industry. TSMC initially struggled to find investors, but Philips was the only private company willing to support them in 1986. Philips helped TSMC get off the ground with funding, key technologies, and access to ASML. In return, Philips received a 27.5% share in TSMC. Given TSMC's current valuation, that stake alone would be worth $121 billion today, about 7 times as much as all that remains of Philips combined. However, just like with ASML and NXP, Philips exited their position and sold their shares early. In other words, Philips played a huge role in shaping the modern semiconductor industry and helped launch 3 of the world's top chip companies. But despite all that effort, they barely got any of the value they created. Philips' fifth and final big focus was healthcare tech. They only started taking this seriously in the 2000s, but they've done pretty well in imaging technologies like MRI and CT machines. With an aging population and steady growth in this sector, Philips found healthcare to be more stable. It has less cutthroat price competition and more regulatory protections, which suits a European brand with a long history and strong government ties. These days, Philips mainly sees itself as a health tech company. This clear focus might help them find their direction, but their performance hasn't been great so far. They've even had a major recall recently. With new trends like telemedicine and AI-powered diagnostics on the horizon, the industry could change a lot. Philips is putting a good chunk of its revenue into R&D, but it's uncertain if that will be enough to keep up with the next big shift in healthcare, just like they missed the boat on major changes in music, semiconductors, and electronics. They were behind some amazing innovations, but struggled to maintain their success over time. Philips once led the electronics industry with groundbreaking innovations and products that were used by people all over the world. They started with light bulbs and expanded into radios, cassette tapes, and early computing, pioneering many technologies that shaped modern electronics. At their peak, Philips was a household name, known for their quality and innovation. However, as time went on, the company struggled to keep up with rapid technological changes and fierce competition. They bet on the wrong technologies multiple times, failed to adapt to new trends, and gradually exited many of their key markets. Today, while Philips is still a significant player in healthcare tech, their presence in the consumer electronics industry has faded. Many people now associate the brand with its past glory rather than its current innovations. In short, Philips's journey is a classic tale of early leadership and innovation, followed by a gradual decline, illustrating how even the most pioneering companies can struggle to maintain their relevance over time.